Hello Year 5 and 6, welcome back to the Wild Garden this afternoon. Mr Hughes started a story with you yesterday from our book The Survivors that we have read before, parts of it, and enjoyed, and it was about Julian Köpke and about how she has been involved in an air accident, and she's as far as we know, the lone survivor. Her chair came out of the plane, she tumbled to the ground above the jungle, her fall was broken by the canopy, and she's found herself alone in the jungle. So we'll continue the story from where Mr Hughes left off. Until this happened, however, her situation looked desperate. She had nothing to eat except a small bag of sweets, and she had no idea how far she might have to walk to reach safety. Soon dozens of insects were dropping onto her skin and climbing into her hair, and with the sun up, the rainforest was unbearably hot. It was also very wet because torrential storms like the one that brought down the Electra continued on and off throughout the day. Having failed to find signs of anyone nearby, Köpke started to walk, and when she came to a small stream, she decided to follow it. It was lucky that there was plenty of water to drink, but the rainy season meant there was no ripe fruit on the trees, and from her parents' jungle training, she knew that eating anything else would be too risky. At nightfall, the temperature dropped dramatically, and with her sleeveless dress wet through, Köpke felt terribly cold. She also felt very lonely as well as frightened. Unable to sleep, she sat shivering as she listened to the startling sounds of the rainforest at night. The following morning, she continued slowly along the course of the stream. It didn't take long before the little bag of sweets was empty, and when her watch stopped, she rapidly lost track of time. After a couple of days, she heard the sound of a king vulture somewhere nearby. From her mother, Köpke knew these huge carnivores tend to land only when there is a lot of food around. Knowing they eat only dead animals, she had to consider the gruesome possibility that the bird was looking for bodies from the plane. To her horror, her fears were proved correct shortly afterwards when she stumbled upon a bank of seats from the aircraft. It was partly buried in the undergrowth, and Köpke could still see 3 bodies strapped in place. For a moment she thought one of them might be her mother, but then she noticed nail varnish on the toes, which Maria never wore. In fact, Köpke never did find any more survivors during her time in the jungle. She later learned that of the 91 people on board the Electra, she was the only one left alive. For several days she continued her journey downstream, alternately walking and swimming. This made her progress very slow, and swimming led to serious burns from the sun beating down on her back and arms. Together with her other injuries, this caused her more and more pain, while a lack of sleep and the effort needed to keep moving only added to her exhaustion. She was also alarmed to find that the insect bites were becoming infected, and that live maggots were now burrowing under her skin. After a week, Köpke realised that she could no longer hear aircraft above, meaning that the authorities must have stopped looking for survivors. This scared her but also made her very angry, knowing they had given up even though she was in the jungle below still fighting for her life. She began to despair, but on the 9th day, to her astonishment and delight, she found an old broken down boat on a stretch of riverbank where she'd been resting. Her first thought was to take the boat, but she didn't want to be accused of stealing. Instead, she looked around and noticed a path running up the bank and into the trees. Climbing the path took all her strength as she was so tired and hungry, but at the top she found a small shack. Inside it was an outboard motor and a can of fuel, which reminded her of a trick her father used to cure the family dog of worms. Pouring petrol onto her wounds ought to kill the maggots, or at least get them off her skin. Köpke knew the stinging would be excruciating, but it had to be worth a try. After dousing one arm in the flammable liquid, she counted no fewer than 40 maggots as they dropped out of her wounds and onto the ground. The effort left her even more exhausted, and wrapping herself in tarpaulin from the shack, she quickly fell asleep. Waking the following day, Kupka didn't feel much better and decided to stay in the shelter a bit longer because she was too tired to move. Outside, she could hear another rainstorm beginning, but later, as the rain died away, she thought she could hear voices approaching the shack. Struggling to her feet and pulling open the door, she was overjoyed to see 3 forestry workers. The men were astonished, and she quickly explained about the crash and how she had spent the last 10 days alone in the forest. The men offered her some food, but after so long without anything except water, she was unable to eat. They quickly decided to take her downriver in their canoe. After 7 hours on the water, she was flown to a hospital and then reunited with her father in Pucallpa. Happily, Kupka went on to make a full recovery, although for years afterwards she was haunted by nightmares about her ordeal and the loss of her mother and the other passengers. Juliane Kupka never lost her love of biology, however, and after qualifying in Germany, she returned to Peru many times to visit the rainforest and study its wildlife. So there, quite an amazing story of survival and showing just what people can do in really extreme situations. And, you know, a good bit of knowledge goes a long way in helping people when they're stuck in those sorts of terrible situations. So I hope you enjoyed the story. There were some gruesome bits, but it's a good lesson to us all on how to get through things. And I look forward to sharing another story with you soon. Okay, bye bye, Year 5-6. Take care.